Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. If we haven't met already, my name is Astrid Arume, and I'm a manager of cities with Deepening Community here at the Tamarack Institute. So we begin this community of practice today by acknowledging that we are meeting on Indigenous land. And as settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. So as part of our commitment to Canada's truth and reconciliation process, we recognize the importance of land recognitions as one small way of honoring and demonstrating respect for the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples. And as for myself, today I'm joining you from traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, Tiohtià:ke or Montreal. Is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. And this acknowledgement and my ongoing learning about those who have lived on this land and over time. So in terms of technical considerations, we've got you covered. We will be recording, we are recording this session. So we will send you the recording of the call, the slides, and any links that we share, so don't worry. If you want to join the conversation, you can use the chat box if you want to comment or add a question or something. But we also will try and have enough time at the end so we can have a bit of a discussion. It just depends how long it will run. And if you run into any technical difficulties, just please message Connor or use the chat box to let us know if you're having any trouble. Okay. All right, so we'd like to do a check-in with everyone. Connor, how many people are we? Do you think we have enough time we can do with everyone?
We have 20 participants. I think as long as we maybe do the one breath introduction exercise, I think we can do it.
All right, let's go for it, because we really want to sort of, what we found is really great to actually know, where everyone is from and what brings them here. So yes, so if we're able to just do a one breath, a quick intro for each of you, just to know who you are and where you're calling in from and which organization you're with. And so we just have a little bit of know who's in the room. So let's go for it.
Would you like me to start?
What's that, sorry?
I said, how about I start and then we can
go for it. Go for it.
So the idea of a one breath exercise is you take one deep breath and you try to introduce yourself. And as soon as you run out of air, that is your introduction. If you take a breath, you're cheating, I guess. So taking my deep breath. Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Judge. I'm a manager of cities with the Cities Deepening Community, and I live in Toronto. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Astrid.
I already did an intro, but in case for those who joined a bit later, so my name is Astrid Arume, and I'm also a manager of cities with Deepening Community here at the Tamarack Institute, and I'm based in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. I'm passing it to Christine.
Hi there, my name is Christine Taylor. I'm with Ottawa Public Health. I'm in emergency management and happy to be here. And I will pass it over to my colleague, Ange.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ange. I'm a nursing student in 4th year at the University of Ottawa. I'm doing my placement in emergency management department at Ottawa Public Health. And I'm gonna pass it to Wayne Bigley.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm actually sitting in for my wife as she has another conference call on Zoom. But we are faith-based. We are here down in Kingsville, Ontario, and because of our faith, we do work very hard on things like self-reliance and being prepared. So this is just more of adding to hopefully the knowledge that we already have.
Welcome. Who do you want to pass it to, Wayne?
I can't see anybody else. I only have 4 up on my screen.
Okay. How about Kim?
Sure. My name is Kim Brundrett. I am with Dementia Network Calgary and co-chairing a project with Kim Savard, who's also on this call, with the Government of Alberta around disaster and emergency preparedness for older adults. Big breath.
Who do you want to pass it to, Kim?
I will pass it to my colleague, Kim.
Hi, I'm the other Kim from Calgary. I work for CARIA and I'm co-chair of the Disaster and Emergency Preparedness for Older Adults project in Alberta. And I will pass it to Lou.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lou. I'm from the town of Canmore. I work for the town of Canmore Family and Community Support Services, and I am part of our emergency social services leadership team. Oh,
Awesome.
I'm going to pass it to Sepia.
Yes, hi, good morning. Yes, I'm Sepia Sharma and I'm a community health specialist for Fraser Health, which is located in British Columbia. And I'm calling in from Surrey, which is located on the unceded and traditional shared territories of the Katzie, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, Coquitlam, and Tsawwassen First Nation. And I'm not sure who's left. I think Henriette. Yes.
Hi, thank you. Yes. Hi, I'm Henriette Thompson. I live on the Haldeman Tract, the land of the Six Nations of the Grand River in the city of Waterloo. I'm a coordinator with Faith Climate Justice, and the availability and role of faith communities in emergency preparedness is an area of interest for us. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Jill to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill McDowell. I'm with the Poverty Reduction Strategy Office with the City of Toronto. Nice to be here. I'll pass it over to Scott.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Zayak. I'm the Executive Director of The Link in Burns Lake, British Columbia. We're a nonprofit society that has a number of social programs. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Will.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Will Beatty, Emergency Preparedness Manager for the City of Kamloops, and I'm calling in from Kamloops. And I acknowledge that I'm located on the Tecumloops-Teshwepnik territory, situated on the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepnik Nation, and I'm honored to respect the people, the territory, and the land that houses my community. Thank you. And I'll pass that off to Lynn.
Hello, I'm calling in from Vancouver, British Columbia on the stolen and unceded territories of the Coast Salish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh nations, and I'm a volunteer with an organization that's initiating a community engagement project for emergency preparedness in a very urban environment. I'll pass it on to Lou in Canmore.
I think I already went, but thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm losing track. Cora, maybe?
Hello, my name is Cora and I'm a public health nurse at Ottawa Public Health. And I am coming to you from Ottawa, which is traditional unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin land. I will pass it on to, I'm also losing track here, Carolyn Legg.
Thanks, Cora. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carolyn Legg. I work with Ottawa Public Health. I'm one of the supervisors in our public health inspection branch, and we work closely with Cora and Christine and some of the others that are on the call on various emergency plans. I'll pass it on. I believe I saw Jacob on the line. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob. I am a public health nurse with Ottawa Public Health. Yeah, I work with Cora, Carolyn, and Christine, and Ange, and a lot of others on this call to work in emergency preparedness and management here in Ottawa. I think I will pass it over to my other colleague, Luke Foster.
Hello, Luke from Ottawa. Sorry, I had a little issue there dropped off and came back. So I'm not sure who to hand it to next, but thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I think we have Faith that just joined us as well.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faith Grant. I am here from the Miami Foundation. I'm the Collective Impact Officer, and I lead our disaster preparedness and climate resiliency portfolio. So I'm really excited to be here with you all as we are exploring what a community of practice looks like for such a diverse region as Miami is. And I'm just going to throw out a name. I'm going to pass it to Henrietta.
I've already been introduced. Thanks.
Oh,
Faith.
okay. What about Lou?
She's been introduced.
Oh, okay. Well, someone might
Maybe
have
I'll
to
jump in because I have not gone yet.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm Emily King. I'm with the NWT Emergency Management Organization, so responsible for communities in the Northwest Territories. And I'm excited to learn what else goes on out there. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Dawn.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So yeah, Emily are both at the territorial level, but our job is to support the communities in the Northwest Territories. So yep, I'm the manager of community engagement within Northwest Territories EMO.
Fantastic. I think did we have one more person left, Connor?
Hi, I'm Jessica Harris, and I am a coordinator with the City of Toronto Office of Emergency Management Planning Team.
Fantastic. Awesome. Are we all good? I think, did everybody get a chance to introduce themselves? Oh, one more, Katrina.
Hi there, my name is Katrina. I'm a nursing project officer with Ottawa Public Health Emergency Management Program. We're located in Ottawa, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. So thank you for having me.
Super. Thank you so much. This is so interesting. So many interesting people in the room. So thank you so much for joining us today. And then I'll just do a quick intro as well about Tamarack for those of you who perhaps don't know us, or maybe it's your first time. So Tamarack Institute, so we're an organization that works on community development with hundreds of communities across Canada, helping to end poverty, supporting youth futures, deepening community, and on climate transitions. And our work at Deepening Community specifically is focused on creating places of belonging where people feel safe, engaged, included, and care for those around them, resulting in healthy and resilient communities with thriving local economies. So we use asset-based community development, or ABCD, lens alongside collective impact to and support local institutions, organizations, neighborhoods, towns, and cities to build their knowledge, skills, to develop local strategies and enable community-wide change. And Connor will just share a link to our website as well if anybody wants to look us up later. All right, so let's get into it. I want to share with you as well, we have a bit of a plan and outline for 2023, these sessions. These are rolling every 2 months or so. And just to kind of give you like an idea of what we've put together for this year. So we're going to start off today with like an introduction. We're not going to be able to go very deep into it, but we're going to touch on the mobilization for emergency preparedness. Then in the next session, which will be in April, we'll go a little deeper into the actual neighborhood level engagement for emergency planning. Then we will talk about actual mapping of community assets and resources for emergency preparedness, move on to resource coordination, collective collaboration, and then planning for emergency preparedness. And we do have a final session as well. We'd like to have at some point, it might probably be in January in next year, on data governance in community asset mapping for emergency preparedness, because, you know, as we collect all this different information, there's also these questions about, well, how do we collect this and safely and so on. So that's the plan for the year. So you can kind of see what interests you. So that's what's coming up. And really the idea behind this learning journey for this year is really to go from engaging to mapping to collaborating to then planning. So it depends on which areas, that, where you're on your journey on community planning and what interests you. So you can pick and choose what interests you. Okay. So let me just see where my mouse is. Okay. So let's then go into today's session. So today's session is on community mobilization for emergency preparedness, and really want to look at what are the preconditions needed in order to mobilize a community. So we're drawing on asset-based community development principles and looking at what is really needed in order to build a capacity for community to respond together. And we'll talk about shifting our mindsets on how to discover the strengths and assets in a neighborhood, how to connect them, and how to mobilize for inside-out actions. Before we go into the topic itself, I wanted to sort of share with you as well what we use as a basis for our work, and this is the asset-based community development lens, is that community has 7 functions. So one of them being that it provides us a sense of belonging. It actually fosters inclusion and equity. It provides us with a sense of citizenship, right? When we get involved in volunteering and so on, do we feel we want to act upon something that we care about in our community? It helps to increase our sense of resilience and to steward local ecology. It helps to increase our sense of safety, right? So when we look out for others in our neighborhood and we know our neighbors and they look out for us, they know our kids, they're the very core basics of community safety. And it provides us with a sense of well-being and enables health. And finally, also, it enables local economies. And local food production. So really like thinking about what do we already have locally instead of searching for providers from the outside. So those are really like the functions and the principles that we work with. And this you'll see, it will tie into as well today's session. Okay, all right. So let's go into today. So what are the preconditions, or I would call it like the ingredients that are needed in order for communities to respond together to emergencies? So I split it into 3 core parts. So asking, so what do we know? What do we have? And what can we do together? Okay. And there's the 4th part, but it's kind of separate that we'll come to after, about what do we need to look up for. So what do we know? So this is the question to ask. So like, think about the knowledge. What is the knowledge and tools that we need to survive, essentially? What is it, what makes us more resilient? So what to do when something happens, having skills like giving first aid to someone, how to prepare, and having access to tools and resources, from fresh water to phones, to a car, to air conditioners, to food, and the list can go on, right? And also knowing what organizations and group exists in the community that could be involved, what resources, capabilities, spaces, and capacity they might have. Right, so asking these questions of, well, what do we actually know about our community is a really, really important question, because beyond just institutions and places, we also need to look into the people, the members of the community, because we know that having the knowledge and tools to survive actually reduces vulnerability. The next question I wanted to ask was, well, what do we have, right? So thinking about strong social infrastructure and connectedness. So this is definitely something that's a core ingredient for community building as a basis, but also for emergency planning. So, do we have someone to turn to for help? And also, am I willing to enable to help others around myself, right? Neighbors knowing each other by name and having each other's contact information. Things like neighbors knowing who has what resources and who they can turn to. What if you have a big snowstorm and you know that your neighbor has a snowblower, for example? If there's a heat wave, but you know that your neighbor has air conditioning, things like that. Neighbors also knowing where their more vulnerable members live and their numbers for the next of kin as well. So these are really, this is all is these connections in the community that are really at the core and the basis of this, you know, as one of the core ingredients. But this also means that there needs to be a high level of trust within a neighborhood and within the community. And then the third part is, well, what can we do together, right? So this part of knowing what we have, knowing what to do, having the skills and capabilities, but also how can we bring these together? You know, how can we bring the local people together, their knowledge, their skills, abilities, their tools, their resources, connect them, but also not just amongst themselves, but also with the municipality, the fire department, the police department, the public health officials. And how can we coordinate this together? So, so that's why, in terms of knowing these parts and these components is really important. So, coming and connecting these together, you know, enables us to share information, right, and to actually work with the community rather than working for the community or providing solutions for the community. So that there can be perhaps a shared emergency preparedness plan put together so that people are aware of what the plan is and what to do, who to call, who to reach, and so on. Knowing who are the connectors in your community. And we'll touch on the connectors a little later on as well, more specifically, and how to reach them, how to coordinate through these people. So the critical messages can flow both ways, you know, for resourcing and for resources, which at the time of, if there is a crisis, is obviously is the utmost importance. And then finally, so there's also something else that obviously municipalities need to know and watch out for is the red zones, what we call kind of like the red zones. So where do the vulnerable community members live, and how can we reach them? Who is in contact with them? Right, so which communities or parts of the communities are low trust communities? Which communities have weak community fabric? And weak community fabric, what I mean by that is really having weak social ties, not many people knowing each other, right? Low level of neighborly connections. And also areas that have been historically underserved, you know, with social, economic, environmental vulnerabilities, because these parts of the community will have less power to take action if something happens, and they will have not the same access to resources, you know, for example, having air conditioners, being able to book themselves into a hotel if their house becomes unlivable, or have cars to get out, or, you know, things like that. So those are kind of like the core parts that what we have identified that we need to have and what we need to look at. And when municipalities are cities or organizations are looking to work in the community to build a community emergency preparedness plan. So really, you know, starting with knowing what we have first. So so that kind of like moves us into this part of, you know, well, how do we go about discovering the strengths and assets in a community? And strengths and assets are really what we talk about. What we mean by that is people's abilities, skills, passions, and here also are resources. And it's not just the people, but it's also the different clubs, associations, groups, and so on. what capacity they have, how much space they have, and so on. Who are their members? Who goes there, and who's the person in charge? Who has information, and so on and so forth. So really, before you can sort of move on to planning or coordinating, we need to take an inventory. We need to take an inventory of what we have. But in order to do that, we need to go out and discover what we have in the community first. Right. So one thing I wanted to share is, so one of the people that we very much turn to a lot in our work is Cormac Russell and John McKnight, who have written many books and have been to many of our webinars. So you can look them up on our Tamarack resources pages as well. And they recently had a book that came out. It's called Connected Community. And in their book, they identify 6 essential building blocks in the community. Right. So, and these are important because, again, like these are all like this is all this precursor space before we can go on and start to, put these pieces together. So there are contributions of local residents in a community. There are the resources of local associations, which I just sort of talked to. There is the support of local institutions that also exist in the community, right? There is the neighborhoods built on natural environments. Like we know, oh, well, there's a shaded area there. There's trees here, and so on and so forth, which can both be, sometimes it can also be a threat. Let's say communities in BC with the wildfires and so on, natural assets can also be, considered, in different ways. There's the local economy, and also the local story, shared heritage, and diverse cultures. What if, for example, there's a way to, there's a community group that has an ingenious way of cooking something, and this might come, handy in also in an emergency situation. So, and I mean, this is a broad list, and really, when we talk to in like community-wide development that we do, but it applies to all of these different parts of the community functions that we talked about earlier. So Connor will be able to share as well with you the link to the book, and it's really great. I recommend you buying it and taking a read. So that's really what we need to look at is how can we how can we shift our mindset from the deficit-based to an asset-based map of communities, right? So instead of thinking, okay, well, there's all of these problems, rather than sort of going into the red zones and thinking all about just the red zones, what I mentioned earlier. It doesn't mean that we're forgetting about the red zones, but we're looking at actually the red zones also in a different way, right? Because we're looking, the red zones are also the zones where there's low level of connection, right? And trust in the communities. So we're really looking at a community, okay, what do we actually have and what is already strong there in the first place? Before we sort of go into external solutions and sort of looking for some other sort of saver sort of solutions. What are some of the ways that you can go about discovering the assets in the community? One of the ways is to have community conversations. And we'll touch on that more in detail in the next session. What does having a community conversation look like? And we'll be able to provide you with some tools as well too, if you wanted to kind of look into that in more detail. And the other way obviously is to do asset mapping. And again, asset mapping is not just the buildings and associations and natural assets. It's also discovering who lives in the community, what do they know, what do they have, what skills can they bring to the table, right? So that's really the part of kind of like the overview of just going into discovering your community assets. Okay. And then what I'd like to then now move on to is then, well, how can we then connect these assets and how can we mobilize them? Like, so once we know what we have, which is one part of the puzzle, is then, well, how do we go about connecting them? And that's where we're going to go back to that part, what I mentioned earlier, is the connectors, having the connections in the community. So kind of shifting away from over-reliance on external and internal leaders, looking for someone in charge, and really going actually for looking for connectors and valuing their skill of connectorship. So that is someone who is a connector in a community. Okay. We live in an age of individualism, disconnection, apathy, loneliness, and there's unfortunately there's a lot of violence as well happening in the communities, and this is very prominent in urban areas. So therefore, to build a connected community, we need neighbors to look out for one another and help one another, right? But this needs to be done intentionally. So in our deepening community practice, we work with our members to build block connector programs. So we build local strategies to seek out and recruit block connectors within neighborhoods. And block connector is basically someone who is a natural relationship builder. They know their neighbors. There's someone who is often there to organize block parties or goes to clubs, volunteers, and is very active in the community. And they have this knack for connecting people one another. They bring people together. They share important information, and they look out for other people. So, and essentially, they're really people that are helping to weave the community together. So, and we have quite a few of our members that have successfully launched, and some very successfully, the Block Connector programs. For example, City of Edmonton in Alberta is a citywide Block Connector program. It's called Abundant Edmonton. We have City of Burlington in Ontario. We also have Kelowna in Ontario, who's a member. They have also, what they have done is gone one step further, and they've connected their Block Connector program with their Block Watch program, because they're realizing that they had the same people reaching out to this kind of same people doing the similar kind of work. So they connected the two together. So really they're integrating the community well-being and safety all in one, which is really amazing. They're actually going to come to our community of practice on community's role in safety in May. So if you want to come and join and hear their story and exactly like how they did it and what they did and all of that. So I invite you to come to that. So that's really the part of like the block connectors, and really recognizing it's actually really important and it needs to be done intentionally. And then finally, well, how can all of this be brought together to enable collective collaboration and to prepare and respond in case there's an emergency? So in our next session, we will dive deeper into the engaging and the methods we recommend. But what I wanted to sort of touch on today is like Cormac Russell and John McKnight in the book also explain, is that we need to shift away from the outside in planning and service delivery and more towards inside out, okay, a change and action. Okay, so it's coming from the community. So it's really moving away from putting someone in charge, doing needs assessments, institutions leading all the way, and people, residents just waiting to be saved, and kind of feeling very powerless if there is, in case there is, if something happens. And we saw this when the pandemic happened in here, So in order to build trust and morale in communities, people need to be invited to participate and contribute in their communities. And it's really shifting also that mindset away from, being needy to be needed, because, the residents, people that live in communities, they're like clients that are waiting to be served, and, they really, and, kind of like needing to be taken care of. It's very much actually they are needed to be part of their communities. But so it's our job to really bring this out so they can contribute. And it's about shifting neighborhood relationships with outside actors away from this wholesale distrust and dependence on institutions toward mutual intent and useful alliances and working together. So really just seeing your entire community like an entire new set of spectacles, you know. So some ways, some practical ways how you can mobilize a community, and these are the ways that we use in our practice, is what you can do is you can do learning conversations. And these are really learning conversations or conversations where you really sit down, when you sit down with people and they do the talking, when you keep asking, tell me more. You know, there's also things like community trauma and many other things need to be considered, right? So it's really there to go there and hear what people have to say. There's also another way of engaging and mobilizing the community is having community conversations. And this is typically, it can be quite broad or it can be quite specific. So you can build the framework, you can ask the questions, you know, what do we need to build to make sure that our community is ready for, ready and resilient, for example, something like that. And you invite people to have this conversation. And then people will start to think about, well, what do I have? You know, what do I need? You know, what can we do together? What do we miss? You know, what can we do about this? Having these conversations, and people will bring up people's gifts, their skills, what they care about, and we'll get them engaged, right? Also organizing community building activities, right? And also having fun, block parties, hosting celebrations, because these are all opportunities for people to get tangled up with one another, to have these opportunities to, I guess, you know, being in the same space together and get to know one another. So it's all about weaving that community fabric. So it's like, hey, well, I know you, I met you there at the party, went you there with your kids and so on. It will really come down to things like that. Because next time you see this person, well, I know this person, you know, we just met at the place and so on. And it could be things like doing, conducting community resilience planning sessions. So this is really intentional invites again, but where people are invited to contribute, but they can also, you can also then gauge their desired level of involvement. And we have this really cool tool. It's called the Stakeholder Engagement Wheel. I think Connor will share it in the chat. And we'll go and explore that a little bit more in detail next time. But really, with the Stakeholder Engagement Wheel, it will allow the person to tell you, or you know, whoever is conducting the conversation, the session, is to see, well, some people will say, well, I want to be really involved, you know, while somebody will say, well, I want to be just kept in a loop, you know, well, somebody might say, well, I just want to be consulted and things like that. So, but that enables for you also to map, to see, well, who are the people who would be part of perhaps the team, who would, you know, perhaps get involved in certain activities, whereas others who are still interested in being informed, who may not want to or be able to participate as much. So those are these some of these practical ways you can do this in the community. Oops, okay, a bit too soon. I had one more thing, but I didn't put this in the slide. What I wanted to add was that, you know, the community's role in emergency preparedness, it doesn't mean that, okay, it's all for the community to do. We're not saying that, right? So we're just saying that community has a big role to play, and being involving them in the process, that's one part, but also building that resiliency within the community is the key component. Now, the governments and institutions also have a role to play, but through the asset-based community development lens, their role is really to supplement community capacities, do for communities what they can't do for themselves. And this is really in the spirit of service. and protect communities from outside actors that would do them harm if they were left to their own devices. You know, let's say, I don't know, some external company would come in and do this and that and the other. So that needs to be someone who has some sort of regulation in that space. So those, so you know, governments, institutions, municipalities still have a very important role to play. So that's really it for like our sort of first dive into this this space. And I think we're still doing pretty good actually with time, and I've been speaking really fast. So I'd actually want to open up the floor and see if anybody wanted to, like, if you wanted to have a bit of a discussion about this, what you just heard, what sort of reflections and thoughts you have about, you know, taking this very like a different approach to emergency planning. And you know, and I'm here as well to answer any questions, and you know, those that I can't answer we'll come back to. So yeah, I'd like to open the floor because I think we have like super interesting people in the room, and just to hear your thoughts on that. So I don't know if is there anybody who wants to open their mic and chats, and maybe also share what you guys are all like sort of, you know, thinking about when you're doing your work, and what are some of the challenges that you're coming up against, and thinking about what you just heard as well. So yeah, let's open it up. Is there anybody who would like to?
Yeah, I just had a question actually, with regards to conducting learning conversations and having community conversations. So are you saying like this is specifically talking about emergency planning? And if so, how do we do that without like triggering anxieties around disasters and all of that? So I just wanted your insight on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I mentioned earlier, like, so learning conversations are very much, I would use to, when I know, let's say, I know that there is perhaps a lot of trauma in the communities. And I mean, I know so many Canadian communities now have suffered through impacts from climate change, you know, from fires to floods to storms. And there could be other traumas within the community to violence and such, is to actually go out there and hear what people have to say. And it may not be what we want to hear, but it's you know, it's actually, it's kind of like the first step is actually taking the moment and opening yourself up to listen what people have to say. So that's sort of like these learning conversations, because you're there to learn what people care about, what's on their mind, what's on their agenda, because what's on their agenda may not be what's on your agenda, and different people will have different priorities, right? So I think it's really helpful also to bring the equity and justice lens to this work, because not everybody is able to prepare and respond the same way, something that we touched on before. So those are like really important ways. And then community conversations. So you can create like a framework around it. So I did an exercise within my community, and this was for community engagement in climate change. Actually, that was in last summer. We did something what's called a climate cafe, and we invited people in for a chat in exchange for a free coffee or iced tea or whatnot. But we had, so instead of just like, okay, well, we're just gonna have a loose chat, no. So we had actually prepared like a little sheet, and we had copies of those. And on the sheets, we had actually prepared this question of how can we ensure that my community is an inclusive and resilient place for all. And you know, the question that you ask, you'll have to think about it firsthand. Like you'll really have to think. So you could frame it in the spirit of preparing, you know, emergency preparedness, perhaps already, you know, incidents that have happened in the community. How can we be more better prepared as a community? You know, it could just be as a starting point, because you don't have to go in wide and talk about everything, and actually recommend that you choose a question that you ask that helps to guide the conversation. And then within that conversation, you are then able to touch on different parts of, okay, well, you know, what do they care, you know, and also what are their abilities and skills, and you'll quickly start to see what people care about, because, and this is all again to discover and to understand, okay, well, what are these people that are coming to these conversations, what are also they prepared to do themselves. And that's where you start to get to that part of like the communities, people are coming to life, because they will discover that, well, we also have agency over ourselves, but also seeing that we're coming together, we also have a collective agency, rather than, you know, well, I'm alone and, you know, what can I do, sort of thing. So that would be one way to do it. And we have some like guide, you know, like documentation tools as well, how to hold community conversations, but they could be about really anything. It can be, you know, how to, you know, support a local economy, how to, you know, make a, you know, it could be about safety, if safety is perhaps a major concern. It could be about many things, depending what the priority is, but also how you want to frame it.
Thank you.
Anybody else maybe have any thoughts or questions, or maybe you want to share or ask each other even, because I think we have like such interesting group of people together, also to use this space as well to ask each other, you know, you can also ask one another what's happening. Jessica, you have a hand up.
Yeah, you know, as noted, I'm with Municipal Office of Emergency Management in Toronto, and you know, back at the dawn of time, my original work was I was working in HIV, where we did a lot of community-driven and community-based initiatives. So building on kind of organic structures, patterns, and interests of the community, I think, you know, is an idea I'm really excited about. But I think once you start getting into formal relationships, we run into challenges because operating within a municipal structure, we're sometimes constrained by the sort of legal and liability and risk-based advice that we get within our larger governance structure. So, you know, for instance, in COVID here, we had some really great community-driven kind of grassroots food security initiatives that went on around meal delivery and food provision and linking folks in with the food bank system. And you know, some of them came to us and said, well, we'd like, and when I say us, I don't mean our office specifically, but to the city as a body, and said, you know, we'd like city endorsement for the work that we're doing. And we weren't able to do that. We weren't able to give any kind of official endorsement or standing because we couldn't guarantee they'd gone through vulnerable, you know, population sector checks, that gone through any of the sort of hoops and requirements that we would expect of, you know, sort of our own staff or directly funded programs. So, you know, I think building a relationship and somehow making those links is a way of reaching levels of preparedness. The city is a large, blunt instrument, doesn't do well organically on our own, but we have these other structural barriers around how to make those kind of live and sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, like, I totally get you. I think like one of the ways, and what we've seen that some of the other members do is when you start working like sort of really from the ground up. And I mentioned block connectors earlier, and like block connectors are kind of like your team leaders on at block level, essentially, in that neighborhood level. And we've seen cities do really well with, so once they have identified the people that are block connectors, and like I said, these are definitely people that will just, you know, they'll go and knock on a neighbor's door and they'll, you know, tell what's going on and so on. And because there's a high level of trust happening, then, you know, like a neighbor to neighbor, it's already there. Because they may not, like, if somebody came from the city and knocked on their door, they'd be like, huh? But but like they know their neighbor, right? So we've seen quite a bit of success with the connectors having that relationship with their municipality, because they become a convener essentially, straight on the ground. And I mean, so much of this work too is, you know, it moves at the speed of trust. So it's not something that you can sort of quickly whip together, and it takes time, you know, to weave those connections, build the connections. What was interesting was, for instance, City of Burlington, when they did their exercise to look for connectors, they just went out and talked to people out in the community. And so they quickly identified that some areas, you know, there were a lot of people, like connectors, you know, and they realized, okay, well, you know, everybody knew Barb, you know, like, and you know, oh, well, she knows it, you know, oh, I know it's Barb, you know. So they knew that, so they quickly kind of also able to identify areas that already had a lot, you know, a lot of connection there. And those neighborhoods where there was really nobody, that, you know, people were, you know, blinders on, driving in and out to their, you know, their jobs. So they're able to also identify the neighborhoods that are kind of like these red zones, what I mentioned earlier. So, but yeah, it's a work of trust, and then, but bringing those connectors together is kind of like your starting point. So we'd be like, okay, but because these are the people that will then know, well, who to call, you know, who are the people that are vulnerable, and that's where you can start to sort of build that basis of, okay, well, so now what? So what do we do together? So what if there's an emergency? And then bringing these people in to the municipal side of organizing for, okay, if there's an event, what would, you know, what would happen? So you would be calling, you know, perhaps your 10 connectors, and you would then know that these people would, you know, get certain stuff done, would get the word out, and so on. So that's kind of one of the pathways to go about it. And I understand like sometimes organizations will want endorsements and stuff, but I think the relationship is, I would say, focus on the relationship, and that's more important than necessarily the endorsement, even though it may be really important to them at the time, but it's the relationships that will really be the core and the basis of it.
And do you know the cities who have done that program formally, successfully, was that an official designation people were given? Say, like, I am recognizing you as a block connector, or was it a sort of self-identification and you just created a space for them to come into?
Usually block connectors, they are people that have organically kind of become this person, but what they did do, and what they did do was they, Burlington has a program for, they have a leadership training for block connectors. So they learn like the basics of ABCD. We can actually share their guide. They have an amazing leadership training guide. I don't have the link for it right now, but we'll share it after in the resources that they put together. And it's really to help train these folks. So there is that. But again, I think like the more important thing is that, and these people don't usually they don't ask for a badge. You know, they don't ask to be, you know, they're just happy to do it, and they feel, you know, they feel engaged, you know, they feel that, hey, you know what I'm doing matters to my community, and they recognize, and that's part of the training, is they recognize why their role is important. So, and really, and they're just known to the city community development coordinators or any other development coordinators, you know, depending on what subject it's, you know, is being worked on. So again, just it's a relationship based setup essentially. So yeah.
And Astrid, I was just wondering, this could be just the block watch program too, that can be enhanced and
totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Christine, I think, did you have a hand up there for a minute?
Having worked in community for many years, I think sorry, I'm trying to get my camera on and I'm not on time, but it's more like community connections, or what the program you're talking to, if I'm understanding you correctly, is more about there's always that person in the community that's like totally connected, right? So like, they know the guy who knows the girl who has the thing, right? So it's more of an organic thing that happens, and so what you're trying to do is foster more of that.
Exactly, and do it intentionally. Exactly,
and do it right.
Yeah.
So in we have communities here in Ottawa that they do exactly that, and it happens organically. And you know, it's like the mom, a single mom who has to go to work, and so she knocks on the door to her neighbor and says, "I'm going to work right now. Can you come over?" And so they just go over and they take care of the kids and comes to work. You know, so there's that. It's that organic reciprocity that happens in the community. The other program, now I can't remember the lady's name who was just speaking, is more of a municipal program that coordinates existing programs within the city of Toronto, if I'm not mistaken, because we have those programs too. Well, like we have the Human Needs Task Force that coordinates all sorts of programs through our 311, and that's more of a city organized programs that will, you know, there's a point of entry, and then they kind of coordinate what programs that are run by the city. But the people in the community that are the community connectors, they also know about those programs, but they're not formally in the, you know, they're not formally within, they just know about it, and they're known by the community, by city staff. So they're like, you know, if I lived in that community, we'd be like, well, Christine, you know, so-and-so at the city, can you just reach in? Absolutely. And so it's word of mouth, it's community, it's reciprocity, it's all that kind of fun stuff that just helps people get through.
Yeah. Well, I think
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I explaining it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think and I think it just comes back to the fact that it's all done, but like what we're doing is we're saying do this work intentionally, because if you want to build community response plan that includes the community, you need those connectors, right? And you need connections, and you need connectors, and you need to weave those connections within the community, but you need to also know what's already there, right? What do we start with? Because people will have, like I said, if something happens, you'll know that, okay, well, this guy has a tractor, this guy has a snowblower, this person has air conditioning, this person has a fresh water well. It could be any kinds of things, right? This person knows how to do first aid. These people have cars, all kinds of things, right? And also other kinds of skills. So so we have to kind of like do the work for both things, and then just build that relationship between the institutions, as in municipalities or cities, with the people. Because the connectors are like these amazing these local team leads that you can sort of, you know, bring together and do this work through them, but you do have to go and out to the community as a whole too. So I see that we're a bit over time. So what I wanted to just thank you so much for sharing this, your thoughts, and I'm happy about this little discussion we just had, and hopefully next time we'll have a bit more time, even we'll save a bit more time for discussing. So next session is going to be on the neighborhood level engagement in emergency planning. So we're going to dive a bit deeper into different methods and how to go about it. I wanted to mention as well, so in case you are interested in learning more about deepening community and a membership, building local strategies, so you can reach out to me as well. And we have an upcoming event this summer in Alberta, and it's open to anybody really who wants to come and learn more about when community and municipalities meet in the middle. It's going to be in St. Albert. Over 2.5 days, super exciting. We're going to be both there, Connor and myself, and our colleague Heather, and we have super exciting speakers, and we're going to do some fantastic workshop work and have fun too.